management at Mac Clinical Research. Started my career off back in 2007 at PPD, where I started as a clinical data associate. I spent initially 8 years at PPD and then left in around 2015 and actually went to pursue a slightly different career path, still within data management, but actually went to work for Clydesdale and Yorkshire Bank. I was there for just over 18 months and then was subsequently made redundant when the bank went through a bit of a restructure. So following that redundancy, I actually went back to PPD and I was there for I think about 4 years, my second time, so collectively about 12 and a half years at PPD. I moved on in 2020 across to Icon Docs. I was there for a little over 6 months and then moved on to worldwide clinical trials, and I was there for just under 3 years, and then finally moved on to Mac Clinical Research. So I joined just over a year and a half ago, and as I say, that's my current role at the moment is head of data management there at Mac.
Yeah. And data management then, if you could put it in like for an idiot's guide, what is it within drug development in the basic terms? Can you just give us an overview of what that role looks like?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, in the simplest terms, it's the collection, cleaning and reporting of clinical data. So the data management piece really starts upon receipt of a final protocol for a project. And from that point, we start looking at CRF design, so case report form design, database design, edit check specification for doing your data checks electronically. And then there's a whole host of study-related documentation that needs to be authored and created. So things like your data management plan, your CRF completion guidelines, data transfer specifications if we're receiving data from external vendors, things like labs, for instance, PK analysis. And we work very closely with all the other key stakeholders within obviously the clinical world. So working with investigators, clinical research associates, our colleagues within biostats and programming, and really just making sure that we are designing a data collection package that, one, meets the needs of the study protocol, meets the expectations of the sponsor, and collects the correct data for final analysis, which ultimately is what the final decisions of the success or failure of a drug will eventually be dependent on.
And that term, because you always hear that, the protocols. What are they like within clinical trial? Like, what is protocols for data management in basic terms?
So the study protocol basically outlines the entire purpose and design of the study. So typically a protocol will start off giving you a bit of background on the compound, any trials that it's previously been used in, and the logic behind why this trial is being conducted. It also then outlines all of the assessments that will be conducted for that trial, so things like the physical examinations, vital signs, the lab data that's been collected, the timing of those lab collections. And then probably most importantly for data management, there's a table in all protocols that's called the schedule of assessments. And basically what that does is it tells you all of the assessments and when they're going to take place in the trial. And we effectively use that for design of the CRFs, but more importantly design of the database. Now the protocol is probably the most important document on a clinical trial. Every member of the trial team, from the investigators all the way through to the stats and programming team, need to train on the protocol and document that they've trained on that document to have an understanding of the study. So as I say, the protocol really is it's the key document for a trial. It outlines all the expectations and everything that ultimately the study will be held against in terms of its conduct, the data that's been collected, and how that's ultimately being reported.
And so thank you. And then I guess why is data management so important within drug development? Why is it such a key key fundamental part, and without it, what does that actually look like?
Yeah. For every clinical trial, the final decision is always going to be based on data. So the collection and reporting of data is immensely important for a clinical trial. Without it, you're not going to be able to make an informed decision on whether a drug is fit for purpose or not. Where data management come in is we are not medically trained. However, we have an understanding of how data should be collected and how to clean that data. So from our standpoint, we design, as I say, the CRF, so how data is collected at site. We design the validation framework around that, so your electronic edit checks. We also do manual reviews of data through listings. So within the data management team, we set out that entire framework of data collection, data cleaning, and data reporting. Now, there are some very clever people who work on clinical trials, obviously investigators, clinical review, the team members, CRAs, but data management kind of bring all that together. So we're experts in our own field. We provide support to other aspects of the business and aspects of the clinical trial framework, and ultimately we're there to make sure that the data that is collected is in a really good state for final analysis, so that ultimately good decisions can be made on treatment options for patients.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've always said, I mean, without you guys and anyone within that sort of biometric space, there would be just clinical trials and everyone walking around going, I don't know what any of this means, and we don't know if it's successful or not. It's such a fundamental part, but that goes sort of unnoticed. And like when it's going well, no one cares. And when it's going badly, you're obviously villains. So yeah, there's not much love there.
No, it's very true, and to be fair, it's a long-standing joke within the data management team is that we've always been viewed as the poor relative, as we like to say. As you say, when things are going really well, we never get a mention. It's all
Yeah.
about if things are going in recruiting and obviously the site level and what have you.
Mhm.
But then when things start to go wrong, inevitably, or start to go off track, it's typically data management that starts to get the questions of, why is there backlogs in data entry? Why are there so
Yeah.
many queries at sites? Why was this issue not picked up earlier?
Hmm.
Yeah, you need to be quite thick-skinned to work within the data management team.
Yeah. 100%, 100%. And I guess you've obviously worked for some really big CROs, obviously over your time. I guess is there a difference? So, like from my side, whenever we say recruiting for maybe like a pharma or a biotech, a lot of the time they'll say we need someone with pharma or biotech experience within data management. I guess how does the role differ over those different companies? And one, is there a difference, or are they just being picky? And two, what are those differences?
I mean, really, the sort of the fundamental difference between the CRO world and the biotech pharma is it tends to be the workload and the number of projects that staff are assigned to. So if you take the sort of the biotech pharma side of things, if they do have a data management team or even a data manager who's assigned to the project, typically they're only maybe working on one or two projects. So they've got kind of extra time to really dive into data sets and take time over review and looking at different aspects of it. On the CRO side of things, it's not uncommon for a data manager to be assigned to maybe 3 or 4 projects, even more, depending on the size and the complexity of the projects they're working on. So they do tend to work across a number of projects and a number of sponsors. So what you'll tend to find is that on the biotech pharma side of things, if staff haven't been in a CRO environment, they don't understand that. They're not fully aware that that's the setup. So at times they can get frustrated as why is this individual saying that they don't have time to look at this just now, that's going to wait, it has to wait until tomorrow, or these types of things. So it's about balancing the expectations. And through my career, I mean, I've seen people who have started their career on the pharma biotech side of things, have then come over into the CRO world and have struggled because the expectations in terms of workload are completely different. On the other side of things, people who do work, have worked in the biotech and the pharma side of things, they've got greater insight into the challenges of that side of the business that potentially someone like myself who's spent the entirety of their career in the CRO world doesn't have an awareness of. So really when you are building sort of relationships with colleagues in the biotech pharma side of things, it's about transparent communication and understanding the challenges on both sides of the fence. I tend to find that when you are upfront about the challenges and obviously you have those conversations, that the working relationship is much better than if you don't have those levels of conversation. At the end of the day, with the CRO industry, we're a service provider. So these pharma companies are paying for that service. So it's about balancing the expectations of, yes, I'm working for you, I'm your point of contact for data management on your study, but I've also got other demands on my time as well. And it's just been, upfront, transparent about that, and ultimately balancing the expectations.
Yeah, no, you can't be angry as long as you manage expectations correctly. No one's ever, well, I say no one's ever angry. There are some people who are still angry, but most people are pretty okay. That's fine as long as you manage it. And I don't know why a lot of people feel the need that they can't have that conversation. It's a simple, hey, by the way, I can't do that until X, Y, Z. It's a
Yeah.
very simple conversation. But I guess if you're coming from that service world, sometimes I think being good service means saying yes to everything. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means managing expectations and delivering on those expectations.
No, absolutely. And sometimes it's understanding where some of the requests are coming from as well.
Mhm.
So you'll get quite a lot of that. You'll get a sponsor team member who'll come and ask you for something, and they're adamant that that's what they need. But then when you start to dig into it and asking questions around, okay, what's driving this? What's the concern? What exactly is it you're looking for? It's either that there's another way that that need could be met, or
Mhm.
it's a misunderstanding of what is actually required. And
Mhm.
again, that can be both ways. So again, it gets back to this whole communication piece and just understanding the expectations. Where's the request coming from? What's the best way to deliver on that expectation?
Yeah, yeah. And one question I've never actually asked it of someone because I always forget to ask is whenever if we take say like stats for example, statisticians, if they're looking for new roles, it's very working on a certain indication is very important. So they're like, right, you need oncology experience or you need this experience. Whereas within data management, it doesn't seem to be that important. Working in different, you guys work in different areas, and it's never really a requirement. It's obviously a nice requirement to have worked on an indication or a therapeutic area, but it doesn't seem to be as important as, say, stats or programming to have worked on that indication. So I guess my question is, one, am I correct? But two, is that why is that the case that data managers are slightly different in that field?
So there's definitely been a shift in the industry around those expectations within data
Okay.
management. You used to get a lot of the time it was an expectation or a requirement for individuals to have oncology experience. That was always the big one. Now the reason for that is on oncology trials there's something called RECIST criteria, which can be incredibly complex to understand and not necessarily to learn, but the understanding of it. And a lot of sponsors looked for that level of experience within the data management team to basically sign off and having a lead data manager assigned or support staff assigned to a project. Fundamentally, data management aren't medically trained. There's not an expectation for us to be medically trained, and that's not to say that there are some people working within data management who are nurses. I even interviewed a guy at Worldwide who came into the team who was a medical doctor who
Right.
data management. So, but it's not a requirement, not an expectation. From a data management perspective, our processes are consistent across all projects, irrespective of whether it's an oncology study, a CNS study,
Hmm.
a infectious disease, whatever it is. But having that additional level of knowledge at times can be beneficial because it helps around understanding edit checks that you need to be putting into place or things that you should be looking at in a listing. Um, but as I say, the kind of expectation now of where sponsors used to be, maybe sort of 5, 10 years ago, to where they are now on that therapeutic area experience, it's not as insisted upon as it used to be. there's other certain indications, kind of rare diseases or whatever, that it may give an individual a bit of an advantage if they've worked on that type of trial before. Uh,
Hmm.
but again, there's really nothing out there from an indication perspective that should be a challenge to a data manager, because again, as I say, our processes are very consistent. We work to obviously SOPs and industry standards, etc. But yeah, I mean, additional knowledge is never a bad thing, but it's certainly not
Hmm.
a limiting factor.
Yeah. And you mentioned challenges there. So what are the biggest challenges you face sort of day to day in data management?
Within data management, it's always timelines.
Okay.
Timelines are always the biggest challenge. So typically, study setup is a particularly stressful part of the, the process. I've had projects in the past where you're literally awarded the study on the Monday, and there's an expectation from the sponsor that work begins on the Tuesday. You put your timelines out for review, and inevitably they're always going to get challenged by sponsors, because for them it's a time versus investment thing, that obviously they want the study up and running as quickly as possible so that they can then start recruiting patients, they can then start getting data into the system, and obviously getting towards that sort of database lock and final analysis as quickly as they possibly can. Again, this comes back to the conversation we had about setting expectations. Obviously, there is a set amount of time that data management require in order to set a study up, in terms of CRs design, database build, database testing, edit check, specification and testing. Also, there's reviews involved, so internal review of study documentation. Obviously, we like the sponsor team to review the documentation as well to make sure that they're happy with everything. So it's really just around managing those expectations. And there are things that we can do. There's certain areas that will maybe gain efficiency so that we can pull timelines in. But our ultimate goal is to deliver a quality product, and at the end of the day that does take an element of time. So again, it's just setting the expectations, doing as much as you possibly can as a service provider, but making sure that the sponsors are aware that there's certain steps that need to be taken, and ultimately the more effort, time you put in at the beginning of a project, the less issues that you're going to have as you move into the maintenance phase and then ultimately towards your final lock.
Yeah. How has data management changed over your sort of tenure within in the industry? I mean, the big one that I keep seeing it's the new term data science that seems to be floated around more and has come in the last sort of 5 years or so. I guess how has it changed since you started in the industry to where it is now? Maybe what are the maybe challenges that have changed, or maybe different parts of the role has evolved? What's changed for you?
So technology's obviously played a huge part in it, James. I mean, when I
Yeah,
started in 2007, it was still the era of the paper studies. Where you would receive on a daily basis, massive packages from DHL, UPS, FedEx, from effectively all over the world,
yeah,
uh, that obviously then needed to be processed and entered. So the size of the data management teams has definitely changed significantly. I mean, again, going back to the days of the paper studies, and working at PPD, we had a massive pool of staff called data processing technicians, who were responsible for receiving those paper forms, processing them, and then ultimately doing the data entry. And then when EDC came in, obviously the need for those data processing technicians almost vanished overnight. So unfortunately there was massive rounds of redundancies. EDC came in, that generated a new level of efficiency, resulted in reduction in timelines and all these types of things. Um, and it's slowly creeped forward since then. So as I say, the size of data management teams now are highs, what they used to be. Obviously, globalisation's played a massive part. There's a lot of offshoring that was done, through the industry over a period of time. But that globalisation again has driven huge amounts of efficiency. There was a term that an old director of mine used to use. I suppose it's a bit cringeworthy, but always kind of drew a smile at the face. But it was something along the lines of the sun never sets on data management. And what he meant by that, because we had locations in Asia Pacific and Europe and the US, it was just a constant cycle of data processing, which again
yeah,
drove huge efficiencies and drove timelines down, because, as I said, those work always been carried out. Now at the present moment of time, again, you've got things now like wearable technologies, you've got electronic patient-reported outcomes. Obviously, these things are now collected by patients themselves at home on tablets, on their smartphones. And obviously, the new technology that's gaining traction now and has been mentioned constantly is AI, and how AI is going to play a part in clinical trials. My opinion, yeah, I mean, it's definitely got its place. I think it's another tool that will be used within the clinical arena. Again, to drive efficiencies and drive data quality up. And with that, obviously, you're getting these new roles that have been created. So while certain roles within the industry have been retired, like the data processing technician, you're now getting roles like the data scientist, who fundamentally are basically looking at the data from a different angle and in more depth than maybe your kind of standard data manager. And again, all of this is driving towards improving sort of data quality, reducing timelines, increasing efficiency, and ultimately trying to get drugs to market as quickly and efficiently and as safely as possible.
Yeah. Is there any platform, like digital platforms, or any new tools that are coming into data management you're really excited about?
I mean, some of the vendors that we are working with in terms of sort of the eCOA and the ePro perspective have been really good over the last few months. Again, as I say, just driving the efficiency of that data collection. We've had a few conversations with some AI vendors. Again, we're really not at the point in time of adopting that level of technology at the moment, but it's always good to keep tabs on what's happening within the industry and how other organisations are potentially using this technology. But I would say probably the big driver for us at the moment in terms of what we are adopting is the new capabilities that are being created by some of the old guard vendors, I guess as you would call them, so like your Medidata Rave, your Viva, Medro, etc. They've come out with some new integrated tools, so things that integrate into the standard EDC package, so there's new reporting capabilities. A lot of that reporting now is kind of self-service, so it gives a bigger level of customization to the data manager without the need of having to rely on specific programming teams within the business. And as I say, it's just that level of integration is becoming more and more. So there's more systems talking to each other now than where it used to be, where you had one system here and another system there, and you had to do like a kind of manual reconciliation or push of data. All of these things are becoming integrated now, so it's more of a data landscape now, which again just helps us hugely with efficiency, reporting capabilities, doing ad hoc data mining activities. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of things that are improving within the industry, existing technology and obviously new technology that's coming in.
Yeah. What's the sort of proudest moment you've had so far within data management,
That's
or just in your career as a general?
I mean, I think when you look back, I mean, I've been in data management now for I think about 18 years, so I shudder to think the number of projects that I've been involved in over that time period.
Yeah.
But I think when you look across the sort of industry as a whole, when you look at some of the new medicines that are coming out and the new treatments that are coming out, particularly around the oncology space, I mean, some of those things I was involved in back in the sort of early days of my career.
Yeah.
Was also involved with obviously the COVID-19 side of things as well. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint one specific aspect because you're constantly working on something new.
Yeah.
It's just, I know this might sound a bit cliche, but I think it's just part of the knowledge of, you've been involved in improving healthcare globally, one aspect or another. Sometimes you feel as if you're just sitting in front of a computer screen looking at spreadsheets and pushing data about, but ultimately that data has went to an analysis phase that's then created a new treatment for a disease or an illness that we're taking a step forward in terms of improving patient healthcare in people's lives. So I think if you take it holistically of that view, then I think that's something to be proud of, sort of overall, rather than one specific thing within
Yeah.
the career.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff you guys do touches everyone, everyone that's affected by anything. And um, yeah, that must be a nice feeling to have. Like, obviously, I work in recruitment. We don't really have the same feelings. We did actually used to have a director of an old company used to say it was during COVID. He was like, we used to recruit for a company that was working on the COVID vaccine. And he was like, we are helping get that drug made. I was like, are we? We're the recruiters. We're not really, but fair enough. If that's how you think of it, good for you. Um, how does it? Obviously, when it comes to submissions, obviously you have different regulatory, FDA, EMA. Does I guess does the role of data management, or does it differ for each regulatory submission? So it's slightly different for FDA than it is to EMA, or do you
It
know what I'm
can
trying to
be,
say?
just depending on the requirements of the submission. From a data
Yeah,
management perspective, the biggest sort of, well, not the biggest change, but where it varies is the status of the documentation. So more often than not, what data management are typically asked for a submission is the CRF, so the case report form that's going to be used for a study. So in some instances, a draft version of that CRF is all that's required. In other instances, it needs to be the sort of final CRF. But again, we work very closely with our colleagues within the regulatory department in terms of what the expectations are. And then obviously just look to provide what they need within the timescale provided. So yeah, it really just it varies from study to study and just what the expectations are.
yeah, okay. Um, Obviously, you like you said, you've been in this industry now for 18 years, but there will be people, just finishing maybe their masters or maybe finishing their undergrad who are wanting to get into maybe get into drug development or within data management. I guess, is there anything you would recommend for someone like that who's just starting out, maybe things to do with their education, or what maybe sectors to get into that would help them maybe in 18 years get to where you are now?
I mean, there's obviously there's a lot of useful materials basically on the internet. I would recommend obviously kind of websites like the MHRA, the FDA. Looking up things like ICHGCP. Obviously, LinkedIn's is a great source of resource and information. Even looking up people in roles that they're interested in, so whether it's within data management, whether it's in the clinical aspect side of things. Um, One thing I've learned over the years is that there's so many people out there that are more than willing to help. So dropping someone, even like myself, I
Mm,
do on LinkedIn asking specific questions. I've answered numerous over the years from various people.
hmm
Uh, and then basically just keeping yourself up to date with sort of industry news. I mean, if it's data management is an area that someone's particularly interested in, you've got the ACDM, which you'll get through LinkedIn as well. Obviously, they've got membership options. They've got a lot of free materials. Um, just keeping up to date with industry news, etc. And looking around, obviously all the sort of the different CROs. Obviously, I mentioned PPD. You've got IQVIA. You've got Worldwide Clinical Trials. You've got MAC. There's so many different organisations out there that have always got roles. In one department or another.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's really just pick the area that you've got an interest in and use that as a starting point. Now, the good thing about the sort of the clinical trial world is that it's so easy to pivot in different directions. I mean, I've had so many colleagues over the years that started off in data management like I did, even colleagues that started with me in PPD back in 2007. Um, and everyone's went off in a slightly different direction. So I stayed within data management. I've got colleagues who moved into the clinical side of things. They went on to become CRAs. They went on to become project managers. Again, people who started in the clinical side of things started the CRAs, pivoted over to become data managers. So once you're in the industry, there's so many different avenues that you can take. It's not that you've picked the data management path and that's you. I've stuck to the data management path for 18 years. That's just what kind of suited me. But there's so many options available to you. And again, fluctuating between both sides of the fence of, you know, the CRO world and then moving into sort of biotech and pharma. There really are, there's a whole load of opportunities within the industry. So it is a good one for people to get into, especially if they're, you know, just coming out of university, they've got an interest in the industry. But yeah, as I say, LinkedIn's probably the starting point. And then obviously just looking up some of those resources and websites that I've mentioned.
Yeah. And is there a certain indication or or therapeutic area that you see in the next 5 or 10 years being incredibly like rich with trials that maybe people should look towards for the future?
Um, I mean, there's always kind of swings and roundabouts, but I mean, oncology is always going to be a massive therapeutic area. It
Yeah.
has been for a long, long time, but we do get, or we are seeing quite a lot of instances now of sort of CNS studies, particularly sort of mental health related trials, etc. Which there are numerous ongoing at the moment, and obviously pipeline studies as well. So, I mean, a lot of it, oncology is always going to be a mainstay, but there's so many different therapeutic areas that sort of are gaining traction, will continue to gain traction. As I say, sort of psychedelics is another trial area that's gaining sort of huge traction at the moment. But yeah, I mean, again, going back to the varied roles, there's so many varied therapeutic areas that obviously generate a lot of opportunity for people. And again, when you get into the industry and you start working on trials, individuals do sort of gravitate towards particular therapeutic areas. You know, seek that out. And again, working with sort of CROs, because they do take on so many different therapeutic areas, there is that huge scope of opportunity. So, yeah, my advice would be just obviously get your foot in the door, get involved, and then you'll start to pick your own path in terms of what your interests are.
Mm. Is there a certain element you haven't worked on yet that you would like to in the future? Maybe it's your Moby Dick sort of thing.
Um, haven't done a huge amount of medical device. I
Okay,
think, believe it or not, I think I've only done one medical device trial in my 18 years. The
right.
last portion of my CV was oncology, but then CNS started to take on quite a big part of it. But yeah, medical device would be an area of interest, just because it's something different. I mean, I think there's not many therapeutic areas now that I've not covered. But yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, every day's different. You know, as new business starts to come in the door and you start working with new sponsors and new clients, inevitably at some point in time you're going to get something that comes across the desk that you haven't worked on before.
Hmm.
But for me, yeah, definitely medical device would be an area of interest.
Yeah. And I know obviously when we spoke about this the first time, and obviously the we called this sort of series of interviews the Unloved Child because biometrics field, they cite all those areas are very much the nerdy kids of the drug development world, and they're not the cool kids like clinical development or those fields. And I guess within biometrics alone, then data management is the unloved child of the biometric space. So why do you one, why did you pick it? Two, why do you continue to do it? When, like you said, you could have went into so many other fields that maybe you would be not respected. That's not the right word, but have a bit of a higher standing in the drug development world.
Yeah. So I think to stay off the bat, I certainly didn't pick data management. Data management very much picked me.
Yeah,
So when I
that's what
left,
everyone seems to say. Everyone I ask that question, they all say the same thing. Sorry,
yeah,
carry on.
well, pretty much fell into it. So when I left uni in 2006, I basically applied, I think, for just about every possible job that looked relevant to what my degree was. And then got a phone call one day and asked if I wanted to go along for an interview for a company called PPD for the position of clinical data associate, which I don't even remember applying for, James, if I'm brutally honest. So went for the interview. I got asked if I knew what a CRO was, which I didn't. I got asked if I knew what the role of a clinical data associate was, which I didn't. But the interview must have went well because I got offered the role, and that was the start of my career within data management. Um, why have I stayed so long? If I'm honest, I enjoyed the career path that I was on. I was very fortunate at the beginning that obviously the industry at that time was kind of buzzing in terms of there was a lot of recruitment getting done, a lot of graduates being taken on. You know, the vast majority of the people that started in the company at the same time as me, we were all the same age. We were all just out of university. It was something new, um, and the sort of career pathway was very well defined. So, you know, promotion through the department, through the various levels of being a clinical data associate, then moving into clinical data, being a clinical data manager, then moving on to be a manager within the department and doing obviously line management and developing staff, etc. So I really enjoyed the challenge. And then obviously when I went into the sort of becoming a data manager and manager of data management, travel started to open up, you know, kind of business travel, going to bid defence meetings, investigator meetings. So it was something that I really enjoyed. And as I say, I could see the kind of progression, which I think when you've been through university and obviously you're told go to university, get a degree, get a good career progression. And I enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the challenge of, you know, setting up databases, doing problem solving for sponsors, dealing with issues, helping to develop staff. And obviously over the course of time I have looked at other avenues within the industry. I toyed with the idea of getting into project management at one time. I actually applied to move into the business development side of things within one of the organisations. But again, obviously I've remained in data management, moving through the different levels. Moved companies a couple of times to help with that sort of development. But yeah, as I say, I enjoy the work. It's every day's slightly different. There's always a new challenge, and I'm now very fortunate to be in a position where I can use the 18 years of experience that I've got to help solve those issues, but also help members of staff with their own career development and, you know, providing opportunities with them, answering questions, putting sort of training plans in place, and again just trying to help the organisation across the board, not only within sort of data management and biometrics but within other aspects of the business of sharing experiences and expertise and improve things. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's the whole thing I really enjoy.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever spoken to someone in data management that doesn't absolutely love it, and who is genuinely passionate about what they do. And it's always nice to talk to people like that. And you guys are very generous with your time and knowledge. Like obviously we're spending time doing this now, and you're getting nothing out of it, and spending, which obviously I appreciate. And but yeah, the everyone I speak to, they're always the same at giving their knowledge. Um, but perfect. Look, Mike, I really appreciate all of that. That was really useful, and I think it'll be gives a nice overview of data management. So I
No
thank you
problem.
for that.